This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good night, everyone. Shkayach. Getting Leil Shishi, Shabbos Kodesh. The Olam is very confused because now I'm going to be thanking parrots, and it is Thursday night. Last night, parrots came to do the recording in Ar Yitzchak, and everybody was totally mixed up. So let me just make this clear. It is Thursday night. And Leil Shishi coming into a very, very big Shabbos Fischel Pesach. And yes, we are thanking parrots for the copies, even on Chalamoid. We're thanking the Mor, the Esther of Weinfeld for opening up the Lechtig of Medrash, and everyone else. Where's Nachman? Nachman called a few times. He's not here. Oh, he's sleeping? Oh. I have this. Okay. I find a lot of times when people will call, is there a shiur tonight? Then they don't come. I guess they were yaitza with calling, no? But that's a separate shiur on its own. Okay, Rabbi say. So, big news in my house today. Very, very big news. I actually fixed the light switch. I called the Rav. I asked about Chalamoid. He said it was Tzarech Yom Tov, and it wasn't considered Ma'aseh Uman. It was just, that's what he considered. Now, normally, I'm the guy, I know I've said this joke one too many times, that he came to ask the Rav after he got married which hand he should put tefillin on. And the Rav said, what were you doing since your bar mitzvah? He said, well, my wife says I have two left hands, so I'm not sure which way I should. I'm this guy. When I fix the sink, it's tzudas, It means it's time to take flood insurance. When I fix the... So here was this light switch, and you can't get in, electrician doesn't want to come in. It was in the main room in the house, and we needed light for Yom Tov, and so don't be saimach on your halacha. I'm just saying, you have to fix your light switch. And the pella was this was quite amazing. I think it was quite amazing that it actually worked. The switch that I put in worked. It didn't blow up the house. It didn't go back. There was no sparks, and there was no what? My cell number? I don't think you want me to come. But I don't have insurance, but no, it's... The other time I did it, we needed an electrician to turn the lights on in the whole house. The next time, I think it was the whole block, but whatever, it shorted out. But I actually did it. And I overheard one of my kids say, or Einiklach, whoever, believe it or not, Zaidi fixed the light switch. I said, what's that believe it or not? Why does the fact that I was successful in changing the light switch, why does that fall under the category? Believe it or not, there's a book of believe it or nots. No parrots? Ripley's Believe It or Not. So on the list in that book, there's a believe it or not, there's 1,000 feet caterpillar. Believe it or not, there's a flying motorcycle. And believe it or not, I switched the light switch. As if it's as big a pella, you know what I mean? It's as big a chiddush that it was done. I don't know. Okay, so let me tell you some believe it or nots, all right? I said, Rabbi Shalom, the way it worked, I made it feel. I said, I'm about to fix this light switch. Rabbi Shalom, if things go as usual, we'll need 3 electricians to turn on electricity in the entire house. There's Simchas Yom Tov, they have to come down today. They have to help me, that's it. Malachim came and they guided my hand. I wonder if the lights are still on. God, it was pretty dark when I left my house. Okay, I hope it'll be okay when I get back. Al Kopanim, you want to hear a real believe it or not? This is a good believe it or not. Rabbi say, tell me the truth. How many of you did not have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei once this Chalamoid? Because there were 3 strikes, right? There was either forgetting Merid Atal. I'm sorry? Daven Ashkenaz. Okay. So, if you said Merid Geshem, right? Then you would have to daven over. Doesn't help Nusach Ashkenaz. Sukkot helps Nusach Ashkenaz, right? So there's a forgetting, right? Forgetting Merid Atal, saying Merid Geshem. There's the same, if you forgot the same Baracha, okay? And there's if you got Yav Yavai. So, and strike 1 and you're out. You have to repeat the whole Shmoneh Esrei. So, honestly, how many went through the entire Shmoneh Esrei? How many went through the entire Shmoneh? Everybody. No one here forgot a single Shmoneh Esrei. That's amazing. No?
When they clap 4 times.
Down from a siddur, I hear. You have to turn to the right page. But if you say everything in the siddur, you could wind up saying Yav Yavai after Yom Tov. You'll also have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei. You know what I mean? Oh, you're listening when they clap, right? But sometimes they just clap and you don't know what they're saying, or a bunch of people clap. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what all the clapperai is about. They're not telling you what. You're supposed to say Slichas Ushavas B'Tamas. I don't know what are they clapping? What are they clapping? So my big problem is not so much forgetting, but when I step out Shmoneh Esrei, did I or didn't I? So I know you're supposed to say 90 times Mashav Richmah, but I figured out a way, and this is, believe it or not, I did not have to daven over a single Shemon Esrei, the entire Chalamoid. I don't know how my Shemon Esrei is worth to start with, but I didn't have to, I learned like this. Instead of just saying Moirid HaGeshem, when you have to say Moirid HaGeshem, they don't remember if you said it or not. I take a second by Moirid HaGeshem, and I imagine it's pouring. And imagine myself drenched, okay? The good thing about that is when it's in your imagination, it dries up very quickly. I don't know if you understand, you can relate to this. So, but what do you do when I say Moirid Tal? Imagine Tal? How do you imagine Tal? You can imagine you're in a rainstorm. You imagine you sit down on the grass and your pants get wet. How do you imagine the Tal? Sorry, parrots? Holding leaves in your hand and it's wet? Oh. So I try to think of when I say Moirid Tal, I think that's like one of the Ramazim. Right? Tal Tchiyah. Tchiyah Samesim. Right? The Shama is getting up. With your imagination. If you're using your imagination, you may as well go all the way. You may as well keep going here a little bit. And that, now, by the same Talimatar, I also imagine that it's boring. By the same bracha, I try to close my eyes for a minute, and I imagine fields of growing grass and wheat and trees. Just for a few seconds. Okay? Of course, by Yalav Yavai, that's Yalav Yavai, right? I'm going up, I'm going out. There's actually a series of, I think the Gra says 28 tefillos in Yalav Yavai. They grow in groups of 7. Okay, let's leave Yalav Yavai. And I have found, Baruch Hashem, where I remember if I imagine pouring or I imagine fields growing. So I remember if I said the same Talimatar or the same Bracha. So in other words, use your imagination a little bit. Use your imagination a little bit. Someone told me, so use your imagination the whole davening, not just there, right? Or like the Rosh Shiva said, if you have in mind by Mechal HaChaim and you have in mind by Baruch Aleinu, I would say you're going to remember the same Talimatar Levrach, Like the Chavetz Chaim once said, if everyone's worried about those two words, the same Baruch, what about having in mind Baruch Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu? That's also pretty important, Birchas Kriya Shema and Birchas Avos, those are all important. But this is my eitzah to you. Use your imagination. Use your imagination. You're learning Masechta Shkalim, so it says you have to imagine when you say a memra that the Baal HaShmua is standing in front of you. Imagine that the Baal HaShmua is standing in front of you. How do you imagine the Baal HaShmua? Did you ever see a picture of a Abaya or Rava? But I guess you have to imagine what your perception would be. So the Gemara says Rav Sheshes was a Sagi Nar, right? Rav Sheshes was blind, and the Gemara says something like his Messiah is in a different category. So there's two pshat. One pshat is you can't accept it because he says he heard it from his Rabbi, who says it was really his Rabbi. But some learn just the opposite, that Rav Sheshes had a much deeper perception than literally what meets the eye. And the Gemara Taka tells us Rav Sheshes met that person, and the person made some derogatory comment about Rav Sheshes that he can't see. They were waiting for the king, and they heard a big commotion. Rav Sheshes said, it's not the king. I'm telling you it is, and it wasn't. They heard a big commotion again. It was not the king. Then they heard it was very quiet, and he said, now the king is here. And that's not the king, and it was the king. Rav Sheshes each time kept darshaning psukim, whatever that means, where his perception was. It's usually when you're waiting for the Rebbe to come in, and he goes, shh, 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 because shh, and the Rebbe's never comes in there. It's just, also when he comes in, you weren't expecting it, that's when he comes in, right? So some say just the opposite, that because of Sheshes used his perception, that his shmiyas are more powerful, in a sense, more powerful than anything else. So my son-in-law is Gesinter Stark, son-in-law, daughter, whatever. So their apartment is on Bar Ilan, right on Bar Ilan. And as you know now, there's a lot going on over there because the Jerusalem municipality decided to get rid of all the 10 trillion buses that come, and where people come from all over, Bnei Brak and Beit Shemesh and Tveria. Now, instead there's going to be a train. There's going to be that light rail that goes through the Arab sections and goes through, Machne Yehuda and Yafo, and obviously the Yidden living in the area were not consulted on this, and they're not very happy about it. But they're building these couple of blocks of train, and there are Afghanot and demonstrations going on from morning to night. So the good thing is, she says, that first of all, the kids in Eretz Yisrael, no one ever told me I have to go on Chalamoy trip, so that's very good. Second is that the little kids sit by the window and they have their Chalamoy trip. They watch the tractors and the police and the fighting and the this and the that. So I'm listening in the background, and I can tell that there's a fight going on between my 3-year-old boy Einikel and his 4-year-old sister. And I hear the kid screaming, which I thought the boy is screaming, Lo l'rechevet, lo l'rechevet, lo l'rechevet. I said, what is he saying? So she tells me that he hears a whole day people screaming and yelling, Lo l'rechevet, no to the train, no to the train. So in his mind, when you get angry, that's what you're supposed to say, Lo l'rechevet, not to the train. So he's angry that his sister knocked over his magnetiles, in a sense, or his Lego. But he's screaming, Lo l'rechevet, no to the train, no to the train. What does that have to do with the train? But in his mind, he knows that's what you're supposed to say when you're angry, right? Supposed to say no to the train, okay? So I think that it's an important lesson to us. So what do children think when they see parents fighting? How does that become part of their persona? How does that become part of the way they think, the way they act, the way they talk? Think about this for a moment. And I think that one of our jobs is that being imagination has a lot to do with the V'sein Baracha in our life. You got to be able to imagine the bracha behind the V'sein Baracha. We have to give kids the right setting to be able to imagine. I very often said the story that this year his father said he took him to the Alexander Rebbe's tish. He had no shaykhs to the tish. He couldn't care less. He was there for 2 seconds. He jumped down the benches and he's grabs the whole of the beer from the Shalom Zacher and he's not Pesach time. And he's schmoozing with his friends and he's hacking with his friends. And so he says when he was in Auschwitz, he would go to sleep Friday night and close his eyes, and he would imagine standing on the parenches and imagine the Rebbe sitting at the head of the parenches and listening to the smears. And he said then he was there. He was there. Even though he said he needed that flash in his eyes. So he said, when I was in Alexander, I wasn't there. But when I was in Auschwitz, I was in Alexander. There's a lot that what we want to do in terms of chinuch is creating a scene for the kid that he has what to imagine. He has to have what to imagine. And if the kid closes his eyes, okay, he sees the Lola Rechevet, he'll get over that, that'll be fun. But if he sees his parents fighting, what's in his persona? What's his imagination? When he wants to draw on a peaceful family setting, what does he see? He realizes how this affects his child. So someone asked HaChaim Kanievsky, Zayin Gezinnt Stark, this was his Shiloh. Shiloh was, if he goes to learn in the Beis Medrash, he accomplishes much more. If he learns at home, it's hard for him to learn. Because whatever, the kid's screaming, yelling, a normal family. But on the other hand, maybe you should go to the Beis Medrash because chayecha koidem. So Reb Chaim said, chayecha koidem. Chayecha is your children. Wait, chayecha koidem says you should stay home, your kids should see you learn. That's what chayecha koidem is. Understand? It's a very different way of looking at things. So, this is the parasha of Kriyas Yamsuf, right? V'yikach sheish meyes rechev bacher. So there's a very interesting word from the Ramshif. It sounds like a little vertel, but he didn't say vertlach. V'yikach sheish meyes rechev bacher. So he said like this. The gematria of rechev, right? Now that we're on the topic of rechevet and rechev, trains and wagons. The gematria of rechev is how much? 222, right? 220. And minus 6 is gematria bacher. That's what he says. So for yikach sheish, if you take the sheish, if you take the 6, ois rechev, you're going to have the gematria of bacher. What's the Maramsha? That's what the pasuk means. Yikach sheish meis rechev bacher. He took 600 choice chariots, chariot riders, whatever. What are you trying to tell me here? So I was just thinking what Maramshiv is really saying. What does rechev represent? Rechev represents power. Right? I'm a control. I'm by the throttle. You'll go into virtual reality and you're sitting by the plane and pulling back on the throttle, shooting through the air, you know what I mean? That's rechev. And what's bacher? Bacher is bechira. What do you want me to do? I'm trying to make a good decision. I don't know what to do. Sheish is the shesh kitzavos. The Eibush is all over. He's ma'ala, moirid. He's here, he's there. He's up, down, right, left, right. How does the song go? Here, there, right, left. What was Uncle Moshe's song? Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. Okay, like I said, I don't get called to sing in many places. So, if you take the shesh, if you take the fact that the Eibush is in control of the world out of the rechev, then bacher, you're left with your bchira. Let's try to understand that. Or in Yiddish, as they say, it's a title of Kleingeld. So one of my Einiklach asked for a tractor, because they're doing construction in front of his house, so he sees tractors. So I told him I'm going to try to get him a tractor, Then he said, and next year I'm going to get the sand, he said. Because what's the point of the tractor if you have no sand to play with it? So he's going to wait, that tractor is going to sit idle the entire year until the sand comes. Which is really what looks like construction sites in New York City. First comes the tractor, they park it there, close the whole street, and a year later they come with the sand to do the construction. Could be he's working along those lines. So I'm just thinking, sounds a little ridiculous, right? First comes the tractor, then comes the sand, a year later. It's first you have sand, and then to get rid of the sand, you need the tractor. Should be the other way around. Or should it? Says the Mabit, the Dover Pella, Rabbi say. What is the purpose of tefillah? He says, depends if you're down here or you're up there. Down here on this world, tefillah is, you're driving, you think you made the light or not, and you see flashing lights behind you. Hashem, please, Hashem, no, please, Hashem. And the police car turns away. So, you had a tzara, and you davened, and the tzara was lifted. That's the way we look at tefillah down here. He says, up there, it's different. The Rebbeinu Hashem says, you need now a moment to be drawn closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore Hashem sends the police car. Down here on this world, okay, the purpose of tefillah is to take away the tzara. In Shemayim, we're going to see that tzara is meaningless anyway after 120. But the purpose of the tzara is to generate tefillah. So for those of you that say, you say Bameh Madlikin Friday night, parents? You say Kigavna.
No, but like when I daven Ashkat Midnight, I said,
We daven Ashkat, I say Bameh Madlikin. Oh, they don't say Kigavna, okay. So this guy showed up in the yeshiva, and he's verhering the Bachrim. So really, the way it worked, then you hired a Talmud Chacham to verher a Bacher. But he was an Am Haaretz, and he was also very cheap. He said, I could verher the Bacher. What do you know? He knows Perik Bameh Madlikin. He says it every Friday night. So he goes, yeah, so he comes around, the Bachrim are standing around him, you know. He's verhering them for who wants his daughter. He goes, I have a kasha. What's your kasha? Bameh Madlikin, Bameh Madlikin. What are you allowed to light with Friday night? What are you not allowed to light with Friday night? Ein Madlikin loy belechesh, right? V'loy b'chaysin, v'loy b'klach, right? And then it says, v'loy b'chaylev nachem, not with nachem's chaylev. Really what it says is v'loy b'chaylev, not with fat. Period. Nachem hamadai oimer, Nachem hamadai is talking about something else. But he didn't know where to put the period. So he thought it means v'loy b'chaylev nachem, that you can't light with Nachem's chaylev. So he said, what did they have against Nachem? That you're not allowed to use his chaylev. Why? It was very hard to the Bachrim to answer that kasha. Except they told him that it's not the way, you're putting the period in the wrong place. Finally, one Bacher came who was also not the brightest bulb in the box. And he came along and he said, I know what they have against Nachem. What? Nachem didn't want to go out of Mitzrayim because it says V'hi b'shalach pariyas ha'am v'loy Nachem. Nachem didn't want to go, and that's why we will not use his chaylev Friday night. And the father-in-law said, Mazel Tov! He found the bacher, found the good shidduch. He found the good shidduch. For him, it was a very, very good shidduch. You know what I mean? Right? As I've often told you this year, that they told the Divrei Yoel, the Rabbi, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, the manager of the girls' camp, said that the girls broke in and stole the cake, stole kakash cake Friday night. And the Rebbe smiled. He said, Rebbe, why are you smiling? He says, because the manager of the boys' camp just told me that the boys broke in and stole the children Friday night. I was wondering, where are we going to find shidduchim for them? I see the Eibishter took care of it already, right? So for him it was a good shidduch, okay? For him it was a good shidduch. Says the Zera Shimshon, and why will Nachem Lakim Derech Eretz Pelishtim? Why? Because they're going to see war, they're going to get frightened, turn around and come back. He says that Paroi, he has a whole Torah, but part of the Torah is that the Yidden left Mitzrayim prematurely. That's why we're still in Galus. Were the Yidden able to wait out the full 400 years, would have been the Gemar Hatikim, we would no longer be in Galus, but we left Abisala too early, and that's why we have to go back to Galus. Everything we're wandering in Galus is to fix the fact that we left too early. So really, had they left after the full 400 years, they could have gone through the land of Pelishtim, because they would have not been frightened of the Muhammad. So it was, in other words, so what all our going around and around is to compensate. There's a cheshbon the Eibishter has. You cannot go straight into Eretz Yisrael because I have to make up because you came out of Mitzrayim too early. And the same is true for our lives. Everything that goes on in our life that seems to mess us up. Everything that says I'm supposed to go for the second day's Yom Tov here. Those person we're supposed to go. I didn't go. Someone was telling me about a friend of mine. His children were caught Erev Yom Tov. They closed the Verrazano Bridge and they were coming from Lakewood and they wound up having a very, very nice people by unbelievable Machnise Archim in Staten Island.
One of the Pesach, the head of the Pesach had helped Staten Island, hosted a couple from Lakewood.
Hosted a couple from Lakewood. So the people in Staten Island saved a lot of people from having to eat matzah on the Verrazano Bridge. The matzah would have blown away also if they didn't even have matzah. But maybe that's why it has to be Yiddish Yeshiva in Staten Island. I don't know. But Al Kolpanim, so 3 days in Staten Island, by a stranger who's so kind to take in a family with kids. On Pesach, when you don't miss, guess what? It's not because they closed the bridge that you were in Staten Island. You were supposed to be in Staten Island, and that's why they closed the bridge. And if you look at it that way, your blood pressure goes down a lot. So someone gave me the story that the people going back and forth to Orlando, and a bunch of people were stuck because it seems somewhere in I-95 in South Carolina, I-95 goes through South Carolina, a truck carrying radioactive material turned over. A truck carrying uranium, and what they did was they sealed the highway, obviously miles in each direction, and they evacuated people from the houses, and suffice it to say, those that were sitting in traffic were there for, breakfast, lunch, and supper. And so I take from this story is, really trucks carry uranium? Atomic bombs, I thought uranium is that the Iranians are enriching uranium, and we have satellites, and we're you mean on the BQE when this big tractor trailer on that curve by Brooklyn Bridge Park, where it's an impossible turning, you're convinced you're between two trailers? You mean they could be carrying uranium?
You never see the signs before the tunnel if you have radioactive equipment. Don't go through the tunnel.
But probably the two trucks on the side of you don't see the back of the. Oh, wow.
I'm
saying here I am. I'm driving on the BQE. And I'm worried about, that I have to buy new shoes for Yom Tov, and I forgot to put on my jacket before Yom Tov, and I'm worried about, oh no, there's a leak in my ceiling, and by the way, these two trucks are carrying nuclear bombs. Oh, maybe we should stop worrying about those things, Like, where are we on this world, So you want to worry, there's a lot of things to worry about. Iran is building a nuclear bomb, they're going back to the agreement, Russia and Ukraine are going to war, if you want to get away from that and just think about the weather so you can relax a little bit, the National Hurricane Center that said, and they predict for 2021, there's going to be a record of 16 to 20 main storms and 7 to 10 hurricanes. So what should I do? I should open my umbrella and from now on hold it that way. You want things to worry about? And we're not even starting with people that are worried about COVID or worried about everything else. I don't know. Rabbi Shalom, I'll let you run the world. Kol Rechev, that's for you. Okay? Wherever I wind up, Bacher, that's my bchira. Where am I? So I read someplace today, there was a Rabbi somewhere that whatever, the kids were not behaving on the bus. They were sitting on the bus. They were on the way to yeshiva. He made them all get off the bus, and they had to walk up the rest of the way to the yeshiva, and it was a very big hill up, and they were very, very upset about it. And then they went on some type of Chalamoy trip sometime, and they went someplace in Eretz Yisrael, and they went down a big mountain, and then they got out, and they had to climb up the rest of the mountain, and that was the fun. So he said, how come this was fun and you paid for it? When I made you get off the bus and walk up, you were so angry because that was a punishment and this was entertainment. So who decided that's a punishment, this is entertainment? You could have decided that it's all entertainment, right? We have to define, reset punishment, reset our imagination, reset who we are. Who are we? So Yaakov Galinsky says a story, that the Rav is sitting in a Beis Medrash, and in walks the town Ganef. Not Stama Ganef, a notorious Ganef. And he is going over to the Rav is like, the Pushkas, his watch his wallet. This guy is like, he's the terror of the town. And not only that, he's in with the police, he's in with the, don't ask. The Rav is like petrified. And he walks over to the Aron Kodesh, and he opens up the Aron Kodesh. He says, maybe someone's sick in his family. What's he davening for? Is he stealing the Sefer Torahs? And he hears him saying, Rabbi Shalom, al tashlicheni milfanecha. Ay veruach katshechal tikach mimeni. Ruach katshechal tikach mimeni. So the Rav screams, what do you need Ruach HaKodesh for? To know the number of the guy safe? Like, whoa. What do you mean? That's your problem? Fix your wagon. You know what I mean? Fix who you are. And if Shol Salanter said that if someone's a ganef, he's a Talmud Chacham, he's not stam a ganef, he's listed Mizuyan. Because he's going to use his status as a Talmud Chacham to enhance his Geneva. Somebody once came to the stipler, he asked for a bracha for Atzlacha, so the stipler said to him, how do I know who you are? I don't know, I can't give you Atzlacha. Maybe you want to rob a bank. Well, I should give you Atzlacha to rob a bank, right? Where are you? Who are we? So I think that part of Kriyas Yamsuf, part of Pesach, is a reset. It's a reset. We have so many problems because we have to reset who we are, the way we think. So Parshas Re'eh ends, Shalosh Pam Bashana, 3 times a year, Yeroah Kol Zechurchas Pnei Hashem, everyone has to come to be other Regel. Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos. And right afterwards comes Parshas Shoftim, and we say, Shoftim v'Shoitrim Titan L'cha B'chal Shi'arech. Says the HaChaim HaKadosh. Okay? Schus of the HaChaim HaKadosh, give us a good geben shiar. Smach mitzvah, samach mitzvah zu. The mitzvah of Shoftim v'Shoitrim Titan L'cha B'chal Shi'arech, you should put officers in all of your Shi'arech, all of your doorways, all of your entrances. Le mitzvahs gimel pamim bashana, to the mitzvah of being oile regel 3 times a year. Lahoyer, that's to be ma'oirer, shagam she mitzav chalalis gimel pamim. Even though Hashem commands us 3 times. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. Leroy says Pnei Hashem to go up to Yerushalayim and be in the Beis HaMikdash. V'sham hu oimedes gedoy lekvua. And there's the Sanhedrin, there's the Lishkas Hagazis, the main Sanhedrin. Afal bikein sarach limnoi shoftim. You have to have shoftim in your own town. So that's why, even though 3 times a year going up to the Beis HaMikdash, I don't need my shofet over here, I have my shoftim over there. And I think we can take a deeper look at what the HaChaim HaKadosh seems to be saying. But first, here's what the Baal HaTurim says. He says, Ki ha-shoftim aziram ma'am. The shoftim are the ones who warn the people, not to sin during Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is a likely time to sin. So Memela, the Torah finishes off 3 times a year, you should go be early regel. But Shoftim v'Shoitrim, be careful during Yom Tov. What is this all about? Mechaber says, Siman Tav Kov Chav Tesiv, the Aleph Lashon of the Rambam, that there's an obligation lahamid Shoitrim, put up Shamrim, Shoitrim, B'Regalim, during the Yom Tovim, Shiu Meshoitetim, they should wander around, Umechapsim, they should check out, Beganois, in the gardens, or Bepardesim, and in the orchards, V'Halanaharais, by the rivers, Shlo Yiskapsu Sham, that they shouldn't gather over their lechel to eat, V'Lishtos, and to drink, Anoshim v'Noshim, men and women, V'Yivoy l'dei Aveira, they should come to an Aveira. You have to warn l'chala'am, shlo yisarvu, they shouldn't mix up, anoshim v'noshim, men and women, b'beteim, in their houses, b'simcha, especially when you're in simcha, v'layimshechu b'yayin, they shouldn't get caught up in one drink too much, shemi yavoy l'dei aveira, it'll bring to an aveira, ela rather, yiyu kulam kedoshim. So that's what the Baal HaTurim means, that there's a chiyuv to put in shoftim v'shoitrim titin l'chal b'chal sherecha, right next to Yom Tov. So hold it. Put the brakes on over here for a second. Hashem is saying that along with Yom Tov comes this Yainis. Families are together, right? Daughters-in-law, sisters-in-law, and there could be problems. If you're not careful, there could be problems. So therefore, instead you go on Chalamai trips and you wander off, and who knows what's going on, but you have to be careful. And you have to set up Shoftim v'Shoitrim to make sure things are in order. And every Yom Tov, do this every Yom Tov, right? Do this Pesach, do it Shavuos, you have to do it Sukkos. Because the nature of Yom Tov and drinking wine and the chiyuv of Simchas Yom Tov lends to the problem of a pirtz and sneas. Can I ask you a question? So why did Hashem make Yom Tov for? If it brings us Yainis. Hashem is telling us 3 times a year to do Yom Tov, and then you turn around and you're telling me what? And you're telling me, but so don't give us the Yom Tov, don't make us drink wine, you won't have the problem. So Elamai, Hashem says, no. No, you have to live in this world. You have to have Yom Tov. You're right, if a person's sittering that he's going to die every second, the Gemara says in a time of pachad, he doesn't have bad machshavos. So Hashem says, I hold the last card. You want me to clean up your bad machshavos? Whoop, gets a call from the doctor, we have to take a biopsy, Rahman al-Islam. That's the end of his bad machshavos. Gets a call from the IRS, you're under a federal investigation, we're going to the U.S. attorney, that'll be the end of his bad machshavos. Hashem says, I have the card. No, but I want you to, in Chas v'Shalom, I don't want that to happen. I want you to drink wine, I want you to have Simchas Yom Tov, and I want you to be responsible. And that's true for Yom Tov, and it's true for everything else in our life. And wait, that's what the HaChaim HaKadosh is saying. That yes, there's oil regel, but I need soiftim b'soitrim titin l'cha b'chal sherech. I need you to understand that life is this battle of saying no, no, no. They didn't close the bridge and I wound up in Staten Island. No, 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 no. I wound up in Staten Island because I was supposed to be there. Why did I move to Staten Island for? Because the house was $100,000 cheaper? No, so you should have the schus. Yeah, that's the biggest schus in the world. You took in a family. I remember once I went over to someone, I was a young man, I wanted to read a shidduch, and I told my Rosh Yeshiva that was trying to get a shidduch for his baruch. He says it was a ness that we changed bungalow colonies. So Pink and my wife met somebody, we met someone, and we were able to arrange a shidduch. He says, Chocha, there had to be a shidduch, so Hashem sent you from one bungalow colony to the other. Okay, this Hashem wants us to reverse. Shoiftim v'shoitim. What does a shoifa do? Traffic, go the other direction. Hashem, Ramosha said, Hashem itzadei gever kainanu v'darka yechbatz. Hashem sends us where we're supposed to go. So the Maril Diskin, you know how the Maril Diskin got to Yerushalayim? The Maril Diskin was Rav and Brisk, an Ir v'ein b'Yisrael. And loyaleinu v'loyalechem, there was a man that went off the derech, and he didn't want to give his wife a get. And there was Saras, and he was very well attached with the authorities, and something getoikt. You see all these problems. Today we have problems we never had. Always had the same problems. Klal Yisrael survived it, don't worry. And so the Maril Diskin negotiated with him, and they were going to pay him X amount of money until he gives the get. He wasn't happy about it, but somehow he was forced into this agreement. And the girl's father brought the money to the Maril Diskin. The Maril Diskin had the money in front of him. And the next morning, the husband was supposed to come, his bezin would write the get, and then he would give the money to the man. And Maril Diskin is learning a whole night. He dozes off. He wakes up, it's dark. It's dark. Who lashed out the lights? He turns on the candle, and the money's gone. And he understands a ganef must have come, swooshed. And he figures that the husband probably stole the money, and now he's going to turn around and say that the Maril Diskin is the one who stole the money, and he fell into a terrible trap. It's a pel de gazach. The first thing he did was, he called in the Rogatshov, who was then 17 years old, and he was staying by the Maril Diskin. He was a bacher. He called him in and said, run for your life. Run across the other side of the ocean, because they're not going to say the rabbi took the money. They're going to say, that 17-year-old stole the money. You're going to be in trouble. You run for your life. Some say he felt, if I get arrested, they're going to redeem me. They're not going to redeem the 17-year-old, so he sent him away first. The next day, the police came to arrest him. Sure enough, the husband pressed charges. He stole his money. Now, normally, it didn't make any sense. The Maril Diskin would steal the money. But, as Hashgacha would have it, a week before, they caught the Galach red-handed, stealing some of the silver goblets from the church. And there was a whole garachka, and everybody was very upset. So now, the rabbi's being suspected. The rabbi, you're not going to arrest with some of false charges. So there was a big heated thing. The people wanted to save face. And for Drayin the Shmis, we will say, and move the story over that the rabbi was arrested. And therefore the Maril Diskin was thrown into a terrible prison. They spent a huge amount of money to get him out for Yom Kippur. And when he got out for Yom Kippur, so he came to Brisk. It's very interesting. Reb Zelig Riegler, who was the Dayan in Brisk, said, he remembers he was a little boy, he wound up coming in right before Kol Nidre. The whole town was waiting by the rail station for him to come. Nobody was prepared. And he walked in. Motzi Yom Kippur, the Maril Diskin disappeared, and he wound up eventually in Berlin, and from there to Eretz Yisrael. And from there to Yerushalayim. And it was a terrible tragedy. And eventually the whole Maril Diskin's family came. And eventually his family was not killed by the Nazis. And eventually his family survived. And eventually, if you know the history of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin was the one who fought for the Kiddush and the Tahara of Yerushalayim. I don't know if he would have made it without him. Rabbi HaChaim Zonefeld was his Talmud. And if you know the history of Yerushalayim, right, the Maril Diskin put up the Diskin orphanum. There were orphans all over the place, wandering around. Serious nefesh that he had to put that up and what went on. He saved a whole generation. So I ask you, you're going to figure out why Hashem does things, where it goes, how it goes. And we're upset in our life when we wind up in Staten Island. And the close of Arizona Bridge right before a 3-day Yom Tov. You don't think Hashem has a cheshbon? So I heard this story today. Awesome story. This Yid said the story. He said there was a friend of his who lived in Williamsburg. Right next to me was his neighbor. And he says, it's first-hand story. This Yid, they said his name was Rabbi Markowitz. And Rabbi Avram was drafted into the Russian army. And he fought, there was a battle for the city of Lemberg in Galicia, between the Russians and the Germans. The Germans weren't giving up. And it was street-to-street combat. It was hand-to-hand combat in the village of Lemberg. Village, it was a big city, Lemberg. Lvov, Lemberg. Father was Lvov. And the battle, the death toll was street-to-street combat, shooting and fighting. The Germans would not give up, and the Russians were told to drive on, right? Stalin said no Russian prisoners, no Russians allowed to be taken prisoner. You have to fight to the death. The Russian prisoners that were freed after the war were sent to Siberia. Because Stalin said, why did you become prisoners? You're supposed to fight to the death. For me, right? Intish Tashira, they made up the two teams, the color war teams, the Germans and the Russians, that they take a break in the fighting from 10 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning. This way that each soldier could rest, so they could wake up in the morning and be fresh and go out and kill each other again. And collect the wounded and so on. And they were told to commandeer houses, okay? Just take houses and go in and sleep there. And I don't have to tell you that what went on in those houses when the Russians went into the house. This Yid said, no, Nasiyan, this for me, okay? I'm not walking into a house. I'm not walking into one of those houses. Where is he going to sleep? He's going to sleep on the street. You're talking about the winter, European winters. He wrapped himself in the woods. He wrapped himself. You're talking about a real Nasir Snatch. He said, I'm not going in with the rest of the guys into that house. The looting and I'll stop there. And he stayed outside the entire night. The entire night he's outside. 4 o'clock in the morning, he wakes up and he sees German troop movement. He says, wait a second, this is not part of the deal. And he realizes what's happening here, that the Germans decided that they're going to daven v'sikin that morning, l'havdil al peil payim avdalas, and they're going to attack while the Russian soldiers are still sleeping. They're going to violate the agreement like they violate every other agreement. And he didn't know what to do, where exactly. The Germans were positioning themselves. They were absolutely sure that the Russians were sleeping. They were all in houses. So he jumped into a German tank. This Yedillah, a Russian soldier. And he drove the German tank up until the main German position. They saw a German tank coming. They were not suspect of anything. And as soon as he drove right into the middle of where all the Germans were getting ready for the attack, he opened fire. At first they thought it was friendly fire, it was a mistake. Then they saw it was no mistake, and his aim was very good. And he basically wiped out the entire German column and basically saved the Battle of Lemberg for the Russians, and knows what would have happened. He wound up getting a medal from Stalin. And the level of that medal was such that, unlike everyone else in Russia that needed a permit wherever he goes, with this medal hanging from him, Stalin's personal medal, no one has a right to ask him where he's going. He can go wherever he wants. So this Yid said, what happened? He came back home, and the Yidden wanted to send Kvitlich to the Rivnitzer Rebbe. Because when you sent a Kvittel to the Rivnitzer Rebbe, you knew you were going to live for the next day. And he gave them Eitzes Vadracha, and the communists really clamped down. They said no one's allowed to pass back and forth. And this Yid spent the next year of his life going from town to town, collecting all the Kvitlich, and then going to Rivnitz and give it to the Rebbe, waited for a response for each one, wrote down exactly what he's supposed to say to everybody, and he returned. And there was nothing they could do about it to stop him because he had this medal. So try to think about the Hashgacha. Hashem mitzadi gever kananu v'darka yichbas. Right? Think about it. Where things are going and how they're going. So Schachter HaChaim HaKadosh. Ma titzagalai, what are you screaming at me? The Yidden were in trouble. Ma elu, right? Afelu. The Eibusha said, sorry, Moshe, I can't help you. The Yidden are not deserving of being saved. So let me say it to the kids what the Rechaim HaKadosh says. Moshe Rabbeinu says, we're in trouble! The Mitzrayim on one side, the Yam on the other side. Hashem says, sorry. What sorry? Halalu Avdei Vaydazara, Halalu Avdei Vaydazara. and the Mitzrayim have a right. You don't have any more schusim than the Mitzrayim do. You're finito. Sorry. You told me to take the Yid out of Mitzrayim. Yeah, but the books say that halal oiv devoid zara, halal oiv nothing to tip the scale. So I daven ahead. What should I do? Hashem says, but what should I do? Hashem says, psst. Tell Nachshon ben Aminadab to jump into the yam. Nachshon ben Aminadab jumps into the yam. Water gets up to his nose. The water splits. It says the HaChaim HaKadosh, the Malachim come running. They say, they don't deserve it. The Eibishter says there's two different mahalchim. A Yid says, Hashem, help me. Okay, open the books. Aveiros, mitzvahs, no go. But then there's a Yid who's in a terrible mood. Then there's a Yid, everything in his world is so messed up. And it comes Yom Tiv, he goes, I'm Avir Bandav, and he sits with his family, and he does his best. Whether he's in Lakewood, whether he's in Staten Island, whether he's in Brooklyn, whether he's a Russian soldier that says, I don't want this youngness, I'm sleep outside and freeze to death, I'm not going into the houses. This is the way I am. Ich gei weiter. So Hashem says to the Malachim, butt out. You don't have this Messiah. You never lived in confusion. You never had to worry. Things weren't going the other way. You move on. So there's a famous story that they told the Brisker Rav once, Pink the Brisker Rav, they told the story, that Rav Moshe Leib Sassev had moirdik hidurim with his matzahs. Such chumras with his matzahs you can't imagine. And he's walking down the street, and he hears a little Yid walking. He says, Eibishter, I was up from Chatzah, he's crying. I can't afford Mehudadik matzahs. Please let my matzahs be kosher. So Moshe Leib Sassev said, give me your matzahs and take mine. So the Brisker Rav said, his tefillos were answered. He got the Mehudadik matzahs, right? The man said, he wants Mehudadik matzahs. His tefillos were answered. That he got it. How does the Kadosh Baruch Hu run this world? There was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov of David Mekalayva. David Mekalayva went to make wine for the Baal Shem HaKadosh in an unbelievable way. He went to make wine. He turned over worlds. To the Mehuder. He was up night and day. Didn't take his eyes off the wine. Comes back to the Baal Shem Tov's house. He knocks on the door. He's about to bring in the wine. A Kazakh comes by. He says, you're not allowed to bring in schnapps. It's illegal. He says, it's not schnapps. It's wine. It's schnapps. It's not. He booms it off. Sticks his head in, drinks. Yeah, it's wine. Says to the Baal Shem Tov, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? So the Baal Shem Tov said, you were in control. You were going to make sure this wine, you never once said, Rabbi Shalom, I'm in your hands. Please make it work. And that's the Rechev. Somebody came to the Nasa the Rav, and he said, here, I own mills. Here's my mechiras chametz. You give me the hechsher, I sold my chametz. He looked it over, he says, the Divrei Chaim didn't hold of this star. It's not a good star. Yeah, I don't consider the mechira to the non-Jew acceptable. He goes, Rabbi, it's my parnasa! It's all my flour, it's my whole years of parnasa. Can you work something out? He says, no, sorry. I'm destroyed. He said, I promise you, if you have Emunah, you will not lose. Anyway, he had no choice. He took thousands and thousands of pounds, dumped it into the water. What happened? Fish came from all over. Party, peed him. Stimulus checks. It was coming in from all sides. He said, if only I was a fisherman. Somebody said, so why don't you become a fisherman? And he did. And he became one of the biggest fish sachrim in all of Europe, right? So his parnasa had to be through fish. But there had to be Mesiras Nefesh. He had to give something up, Rabbi. So he had to give something up to get to the fish. I think that today, one of these days, right after Pesach, is the yahrzeit of Yingaman. Yingaman. I had to remember Ram Gershon Tress, Zechut Tzadik Levracha. He was Mike Tress's son. I was with him in the bungalow colony, and we were driving home. I was driving home from the country, and I had this double blowout in the back. I don't know where I got my tires from. And we were stuck on the highway, and we were in a lopsided position, and it was like the kids were screaming and crying. I thought I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. And he stopped. He stopped to help us. Some other people stopped to help us. Baruch Hashem, some people took the kids, some people took the stuff, got the tires down, got it running. So when we're ready to go, he tells me, okay, so can you drive right behind me? I said, what's the problem? He says, my headlights don't work. And I really can't drive in the dark. I was planning to make it home. I said, so why did you stop if you knew you had to make it back to New York? He says, because if a Yid is stuck on the road, you stop. and I'm thinking to myself, right? This is Kriyas Yamsef. This is Nachshon ben Aminadav. Think into your life. The Chavos Das says there's one Chassidish Maisa I can't make a vek. The Ramosh Leib Sasova once had the matzahs that he got from his Rebbe, the Rebbe Reb Shmelka, and he passed by a little kid that was hungry. He said, I can't leave a kid hungry, and he gave away his matzahs. This Yom Tiv, did you give away any matzah? Did you stop? Did you take in a family? Did you do something which was the opposite of your Metzias? One last story, Rabbi said. The Chayza had a becher. The Chayza had a becher. He didn't let anyone use the becher. It was a becher from his Rebbeim. Nobody can use this becher. And the Rav Shesrov wanted to use the becher. One year there were no potatoes. No potatoes to be found. The Chayza said, Yidden Akami, potatoes is what they're eating, right? The Chai Adam wanted to ask for potatoes on Pesach, and the Divrei Chaim says the Chai Adam wants to take away the Chai Adam from people. No potatoes, what are they going to eat? And the Rav Shesrov went. Somehow he got a hold of a caseload of potatoes. Wagons of potatoes. He dressed himself up like an Arab. What an Arab is doing in the middle of Poland, I don't know. And he knocks on the door. And the Chayz opens up, what's the matter? He goes, potatoes. He goes, what do you want for them? I want a good thing of schnapps, he says, and I want it from that becher. That one over there. He goes, I'll give you the schnapps. You have any becher? From that becher, else no potatoes. Rav Shesrov, the Chayz didn't let anyone drink from this becher, whatever his kavanas were. The Yidden needed potatoes. He said, fine, goodbye becher. And the Arab takes it, he goes, Burichatu Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shahakol niyeh b'dvar. And he goes, Naftali, that's you! Right? The Chayz gave away his potatoes. So think about it. Nachshon ben Aminadav jumps into the Yam Tov. It makes no sense. What did you do this Yom Tov that makes no sense? Did you give away your flour? Did you give away your potatoes? Did you sleep outside? Because this is Kriyas Yamsef. This is what we need. This is the Daber of the Nei Yisrael v'Yisod that this Shabbos and that the next 3 days, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, are all about. We should be Zoicha to the V'vakcha Yamsef Am Karoi, and be Zoicha to the Rasa Shivcha Layam, and to the Geula that comes along with the Shira, the Prati Yisab B'Klolius.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.